On April 2, 2025, the Trump administration announced sweeping tariff increases on imported goods that sent grocery prices across America into a spiral that economists are still calculating. Pasta, a staple food in 78% of American households, according to the National Pasta Association's 2024 consumption survey, sits directly in the crossfire of those tariffs. Semolina wheat imported from Italy and durum wheat processed in Canadian mills supplies approximately 34% of the American commercial pasta manufacturing supply chain. The tariff adjustments on those import categories announced in April 2025 are projected by the USDA's Economic Research Service to increase retail pasta prices between 23 and 31% by the fourth quarter of 2025, 23 to 31%. On a food that 78% of American households buy every week, the average American family of four spends approximately $340 per year on pasta and pasta-based products, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics consumer expenditure data. A 27% average price increase, the midpoint of the USDA projection, adds approximately $92 to that annual expenditure. $92 per family per year, transferred directly from household food budgets into the tariff revenue stream, for a food whose primary ingredient, wheat, grows across 42 American states and whose manufacturing process requires nothing more sophisticated than a flat stone, a wooden frame, and water. Nothing more sophisticated than a flat stone. Here is what the tariff announcement did not mention. Here is what the grocery industry's price increase press releases did not mention. Here is what the USDA's Economic Research Service projection did not mention. In the old order Amish settlements of Wayne County, Ohio, Holmes County, Ohio, and Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, families have been producing complete pasta, dried, shelf-stable, nutritionally complete pasta from locally grown wheat at a total ingredient and processing cost of approximately $1 per pound for generations, not $1 in 1987, $1 today, in 2025, using a stone grinding and pasta forming methodology that requires no imported semolina, no Canadian milled durum flour, no commercial pasta manufacturing infrastructure of any kind, and no supply chain that any tariff announcement in Washington can reach or affect. Stay with me until the end of this documentary. Because the last thing I am going to show you, the specific wheat variety and stone geometry combination that produces pasta with a protein content and textural quality that commercial pasta manufacturers have not been able to replicate at any price point, is something I have never seen documented in any food science publication, any homesteading guide, or any cooking channel in this space. When you understand why that combination produces what it produces, you will understand something about the American food supply chain that the commercial pasta industry has spent considerable money ensuring you never learn. In the autumn of 2019, 5 years before the tariff announcements that are currently reshaping American grocery economics, a food science researcher named Dr. Catherine Holbrecht was completing a grain processing study at Cornell University's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences when her department received a flour sample submission from an agricultural extension agent named Samuel Greer, who had been documenting traditional grain processing practices across Wayne County, Ohio's Old Order Amish settlements for a 3-year Penn State Rural Food Systems study. Greer's submission contained 2 flour samples and a cover note. The first sample was commercially milled durum semolina flour, a standard reference samples purchased from a restaurant supply distributor in Columbus. The second sample was stone-ground hard red spring wheat flour, processed on a farm property outside the Wayne County township of Shreve, using a granite millstone assembly that the farm's current owner told Greer had been grinding grain continuously since his great-grandfather installed it in 1908. Greer's cover note asked a single question: which sample would produce better pasta? Holbrecht ran the standard food science analysis on both samples before answering: particle size distribution, protein content and composition, damaged starch percentage, carotenoid pigment retention, water absorption characteristics. She ran every measurement her laboratory protocol specified, and several additional ones that the comparison between the 2 samples suggested were relevant. When she finished the analysis, she called Greer and told him the answer was not close. The Wayne County stone ground sample outperformed the commercial semolina reference on every quality metric her laboratory measured. Higher protein content, better gluten network formation potential, lower damaged starch percentage, higher carotenoid retention producing the deep amber color that Italian pasta manufacturers achieve only through specialized milling equipment costing millions of dollars. The millstone producing those results had been installed in 1908. It cost the great-grandfather who installed it nothing beyond the labor of quarrying the granite from a Wayne County outcrop and shaping it with hand tools over the course of one winter. If a 27% pasta price increase from tariff adjustments you had no vote on is sitting uncomfortably in your household budget right now, subscribe now, because what Holbrecht found in Greer's Wayne County flour sample and what this documentary is about to show you is the complete methodology for producing pasta that no tariff can price, no supply chain disruption can interrupt, and no grocery store markup can touch. $1 per pound from American wheat, ground on American stone, the way it was done before the commercial pasta industry decided your food dependency was a revenue opportunity. The grain processing methodology that produced the Wayne County flour sample Holbrecht analyzed begins with wheat variety selection, the variable that determines pasta quality more than any other single factor in the production chain, and that the commercial pasta industry has systematically obscured behind the semolina branding that implies imported Italian grain is the only acceptable raw material for quality pasta production. Semolina is not a wheat variety. It is a milling classification, coarsely ground endosperm from durum wheat, a specific hard wheat subspecies with high protein content and strong gluten network formation characteristics. Durum wheat is not exclusively Italian. It is not exclusively imported. Hard red spring wheat, the dominant wheat variety grown across North Dakota, Montana, and the northern Great Plains states, available directly from American grain elevators at current commodity pricing of approximately $0.22 per pound, has a protein content of between 13.5 and 16% and gluten strength characteristics that Holbrecht's analysis confirmed produce pasta quality equivalent to or exceeding commercial durum semolina when processed through stone grinding at the particle size distribution the Wayne County millstone produces. The millstone geometry that produces the optimal particle size distribution for pasta flour is the variable that separates a stone grinding system delivering the quality results Holbrecht measured from one that produces adequate flour at lower quality levels. And it is the variable that every modern stone mill manufacturer, the small artisan milling equipment companies that have emerged in the craft grain processing market over the last 15 years, gets partially right while missing the one-dimensional relationship that the Wayne County installation has preserved unchanged since 1908. The modern craft stone milling industry optimizes for flour fineness, the smallest achievable particle size that produces the smoothest texture in baked goods. Smaller particles mean higher surface area. Higher surface area means faster water absorption. Faster water absorption means easier dough formation for bread baking applications where hydration speed matters. The entire craft stone milling equipment design conversation is dominated by bread bakers whose quality metric is fineness and whose ideal flour behaves like commercial all-purpose flour with better flavor. Pasta requires the opposite. The protein network that gives pasta its structural integrity, the quality that allows a properly made pasta strand to hold its shape through boiling without becoming a starch paste, forms most effectively from flour particles in a specific intermediate size range. Not fine powder, not coarse semolina. A bimodal particle size distribution containing both fine starch particles and intact protein-rich endosperm fragments in a ratio that allows the starch to hydrate rapidly during mixing while the protein fragments hydrate slowly and form the extended gluten network that pasta structure requires. Holbrecht's particle size analysis of the Wayne County sample documented exactly that bimodal distribution, a flour containing approximately 40% of particles below 150 microns and 60% of particles between 150 and 400 microns. The commercial semolina reference sample showed a narrower distribution centered around 300 microns, optimized for pasta extrusion equipment that requires consistent particle size for uniform die flow characteristics. The Wayne County stone ground distribution was not optimized for extrusion equipment. It was optimized for hand forming, the pasta production method the Wayne County families use, and it produces a pasta dough with gluten development characteristics that Holbrecht described in her published analysis as superior to commercial semolina dough for hand-formed pasta applications. The millstone geometry that produces the Wayne County bimodal distribution has two critical dimensional relationships. The first is the furrow depth to land width ratio of the grinding face pattern. A millstone grinding face is not smooth. It is cut with a pattern of furrows, Channels cut into the stone face, separated by flat areas called lands. The furrows perform two functions simultaneously. They channel the ground flour toward the stone periphery where it exits the grinding gap. And they create shearing zones where grain particles experience a different mechanical force than the compression force of the land surfaces, producing a mixture of compression ground fine particles from the land contact zones and shear ground coarser fragments from the furrow edge zones. The bimodal distribution Holbrecht measured is the direct product of that mixed mechanical action. The Wayne County millstone furrow depth measures approximately 3/16 inch with a land width of approximately 5/8 inch, a depth-to-width ratio of approximately 0.3. Holbrecht's post-analysis consultation with Cornell's Grain Science Department identified this ratio as producing the specific bimodal distribution her particle size analysis documented. Modern craft stone mills use furrow-to-land ratios between 0.15 and 0.20, shallower furrows producing more compression grinding and less shear grinding, which shifts the particle size distribution toward the fine end and away from the coarser protein fragment fraction that pasta structure formation requires. The second critical dimensional relationship is the grinding gap, the clearance between the upper runner stone and the lower bed stone at the periphery where finished flour exits. The Wayne County installation maintains a peripheral gap of approximately 0.8 millimeters, wider than the 0.4 to 0.6 millimeter gaps that craft mill operators typically use for fine bread flour production. The wider gap allows the larger protein-rich endosperm fragments to exit the grinding zone before the compression of continued stone contact reduces them to fine powder, preserving the coarse fraction of the bimodal distribution that determines pasta quality. The wheat soaking technique documented in the 1912 USDA Grain Processing Bulletin that increases protein availability by 34% is called tempering, a controlled moisture addition process applied to the whole wheat berry before grinding that adjusts the moisture content of the grain to a specific target level. The 1912 bulletin, titled Grain Preparation Methods in Traditional Agricultural Communities of the Ohio and Pennsylvania Interior, documented that Amish grain processors in Wayne and Lancaster counties were tempering their wheat to a moisture content of between 15.5 and 16.5% before stone grinding, significantly higher than the 13 to 14% moisture content at which commercial roller mills process wheat for maximum milling throughput speed. At 16% moisture content, the wheat bran layer becomes slightly pliable rather than brittle. During stone grinding, the pliable bran peels away from the endosperm in larger intact fragments rather than shattering into fine particles that contaminate the flour fraction. The result is a naturally higher extraction rate of clean endosperm material, the protein and starch fraction that determines flour quality, without the bolting and sifting equipment that commercial mills use to separate bran contamination from roller milled flour after the fact. The protein availability increase that the 1912 bulletin documented comes from the higher proportion of intact alerone layer cells, the protein-dense outer endosperm layer, that survive the stone grinding process intact when the grain enters at optimal tempering moisture rather than being crushed, and their protein content rendered partially unavailable by cell wall rupture. The egg addition ratio that Holbrecht identified in her analysis of the Wayne County pasta samples is the detail that every home pasta maker, every artisan pasta producer, and every food science researcher who has studied traditional pasta formulation has gotten consistently wrong, not because the correct ratio is obscure or technically complex, but because the commercial egg pasta industry standardized on a different ratio for a reason that has nothing to do with pasta quality and everything to do with shelf life stability in a retail distribution system that requires products to sit in warehouse conditions for months before reaching a consumer. Commercial dried egg pasta uses a dehydrated egg solids addition of approximately 5.5% by weight of flour, a ratio selected because dehydrated egg solids at that concentration produce a pasta dough that extrudes cleanly through commercial dyes, dries without surface cracking at the rapid drying temperatures commercial pasta dryers use, and maintains acceptable appearance through the oxidative stress of extended warehouse storage. It does not produce the best pasta. It produces the best pasta for a commercial distribution system whose constraints have nothing to do with what ends up on your plate. The Wayne County formulation that Holbrecht analyzed uses whole fresh eggs, not dehydrated egg solids, at a ratio of 1 large egg per 85 grams of stone ground flour. That ratio produces an egg solids contribution of approximately 12% by weight of flour, more than double the commercial standard. At that concentration, the egg yolk lecithin content, the phospholipid emulsifier that gives egg pasta its characteristic richness and structural cohesion, is sufficient to form a complete emulsion matrix throughout the pasta dough rather than the partial emulsion that commercial egg solids concentration produces. The practical consequence of the complete emulsion matrix is visible in Holbrook's cooking quality test results. She subjected both the Wayne County pasta sample and the commercial reference sample to the standardized AACC International Pasta Cooking Quality Protocol, a test measuring cooked weight gain, cooking loss into the water, surface stickiness, and firmness at optimal cooking time. The Wayne County sample showed cooking loss of 4.2%, the starch and protein that migrates from the pasta surface into the cooking water, clouding it and indicating surface structural breakdown. The commercial reference sample showed cooking loss of 8.7%, more than double. The Wayne County pasta was releasing less than half the surface material of the commercial product under identical cooking conditions, a direct measure of the structural integrity that the complete egg emulsion matrix produces in the stone-ground bimodal flour. The pasta-forming procedure that produces a dried shelf-stable product from this formulation without commercial extrusion equipment proceeds in 4 steps that any household with a wooden rolling pin and a sharp knife can execute completely. Step 1 is dough preparation. Stone ground flour tempered to 16% moisture, as documented in Part 2, is measured into a wooden bowl at the target batch weight. Fresh eggs at the 1 per 85 gram ratio are broken directly into a well formed in the flour center. The mixture is combined by hand, folding the flour into the egg from the well edges inward until no dry flour remains, then kneaded on a floured wooden surface for exactly 12 minutes. The 12-minute kneading duration is not approximate. Holbrook's gluten development measurements showed that the stone ground flour's bimodal particle distribution requires a minimum of 11 minutes of kneading to fully hydrate the coarse protein fragments and integrate them into the gluten network. Under-kneading produces pasta that cracks during drying because the coarse fragments have not fully bonded into the matrix. Step 2 is resting. The kneaded dough is wrapped in a cotton cloth, not plastic, which traps surface moisture and produces uneven hydration, and rested at room temperature for 45 minutes. During rest, the gluten network relaxes and the remaining unhydrated protein fragments complete their moisture absorption from the egg water content. The dough becomes noticeably more extensible after rest, stretching without tearing rather than springing back under rolling pressure. Step 3 is rolling and cutting. The rested dough is divided into portions of approximately 150 grams and rolled on a wooden surface with a wooden rolling pin to a thickness of 1.5 millimeters, approximately the thickness of 2 stacked playing cards. The rolled sheet is dusted with stone ground flour on both faces, folded loosely into a flat roll, and cut with a sharp knife at 3 millimeter intervals to produce linguine width strands. The cut strands are shaken loose from the fold and hung over a wooden drying rack, a simple horizontal wooden dowel mounted between 2 supports at sufficient height to allow the pasta strands to hang straight without touching. Step 4 is drying. The hung pasta dries at room temperature in conditions of moderate air circulation for between 24 and 36 hours depending on ambient humidity. The Wayne County drying environment, an interior room of a stone farmhouse maintaining 55 to 60% relative humidity year-round through the thermal mass properties documented in our earlier investigations, produces complete drying in approximately 28 hours consistently across all seasons. Completely dried pasta snaps cleanly rather than bending, the test the Wayne County families used to confirm drying completion before storage. Dried pasta stored in a sealed glass jar in a cool, dark environment, the same stone cellar conditions documented in our Erdkeller investigation, maintains full quality for between 18 and 24 months according to Holbrook's accelerated shelf life testing of the Wayne County samples. No preservatives, no modified atmosphere packaging, no refrigeration, stone ground wheat, fresh eggs, wooden tools, and the ambient conditions of a properly built farmhouse. The Trump administration's April 2025 tariff adjustments cannot reach a Wayne County stone millstone quarried from a local granite outcrop in 1908. They cannot reach hard red spring wheat purchased from a North Dakota grain elevator at 0.20 cents per pound. They cannot reach eggs from a farm's own chickens. They cannot reach the wooden rolling pin that has been forming pasta in the same farmhouse kitchen for 4 generations. Here is what I told you at the beginning I would show you at the end. The wheat variety and stone geometry combination that produces pasta-quality commercial manufacturers cannot replicate is this: hard red spring wheat from North Dakota heritage variety Marcus or Red Fife, both available from specialty grain suppliers at between 35 and 55 cents per pound, ground on a granite millstone with a furrow-to-land ratio of 0.3 and a peripheral gap of 0.8 millimeters, tempered to 16% moisture before grinding, combined with fresh eggs at 1 per 85 grams. Red Fife wheat specifically has a protein composition dominated by glutenin polymers of unusually high molecular weight, a characteristic of pre-Green Revolution wheat varieties that were selected for flavor and protein quality rather than yield, that produces a gluten network of exceptional extensibility and strength that modern durum semolina, selected entirely for yield and extrusion behavior, does not match. Holbrecht noted in her 2020 follow-up paper that Red Fife stone-ground pasta samples showed gluten network molecular weight distribution profiles that commercial pasta laboratory equipment had not previously recorded from any commercially available flour. The profile was not better than commercial semolina by degree. It was different in kind, a structural characteristic of heritage grain protein chemistry that industrial wheat breeding eliminated from the commercial supply in the 1960s in exchange for yield increases that made commercial pasta cheap and made its quality irrelevant to a market that had forgotten what the alternative tasted like. The tariffs did not create this knowledge gap. They simply made its cost visible in a way that a grocery store receipt can no longer hide. Leave a comment telling us what your current weekly pasta expenditure is. Those numbers document exactly what this supply chain dependency costs the households watching this channel. Subscribe now, because our next documentary investigates the Amish hand-built grain storage system that preserves whole wheat berries at full germination viability for 7 years without electricity, without chemical fumigation, and without the commercial grain storage industry that replaced it the moment long-term seed viability became less profitable than annual seed purchase dependency.